If there's one skill that I would recommend everybody get better at, I don't care how experienced you are, it's asking better questions. Most reps just go through the motions with their questions and they check some boxes and they qualify and then pitch. Questions are where it all comes together. When you get to the root cause of those issues, you can uncover urgency, you can uncover real value, and you can differentiate yourself over every single other rep out there. Look, according to Gong Data Labs, the best sales reps, when given an objection, ask a question 54% of the time, where average reps ask it 31% of the time. You want to learn how to ask better questions? Take a look at this video and I will show you exactly how to reframe and how to pinpoint where, when, and how to ask better questions so that you can elevate over everybody else. Easiest thing to do is assume every single time you ask a question to a prospect, they're going to push back on you and say, why do you need to know that? And if you don't know your reason, don't ask the question. But if you do know your reason, sometimes you can even preempt their answer with that reason to open them up. Here's an example. A lot of times when people ask, John, or I'll ask, who's the competition? They might be a little hesitant to give me that. We're looking at 3 different vendors. And so because I used to get that so often, I wouldn't even wait for their answer. I would ask, so who else you talking to? And look, the reason I ask is because if you're talking to X, Y, and Z, you're comparing apples to apples, and it's going to be pretty easy for you to make the decision. But if you're talking to Q, Z, and Y, you're comparing apples to oranges to lemons, and it's going to be harder for you to make that decision. That's why I'm asking. And you will watch them relax and give up that answer. Because the 2 things people are trying to figure out, especially when it comes to sales reps, is why are you asking this and what are you going to do with it? So if you tell them why you're going to ask and have a reason, it gets them to open up a lot more. Look, if you don't get to impact in your conversation with a client, you don't have a deal. That's why you have to go deeper on your questioning skills and look for impact, which is why we talk about impact questions. And the easiest way to do this is by literally adding the word impact to your question. So if you have a problem, you uncover what that problem is. Hey, what's the impact of that problem on you, on the organization? And by the way, what happens if you don't solve this problem? What is the impact? Because if you don't have impact or they can't answer that question, you are either not talking to the right person or I would not forecast that opportunity. Hunt for impact. Earlier in my career, I used to ask questions just so I could get to the next one, just so I could get to my pitch. I didn't listen to what their answers were. I didn't dig deeper into find out the real root cause of what those problems were. I was just asking questions to ask questions. Then I came across layering questions, where you ask the next layer, which is tell me more about this, or could you give me an example of, or whatever that might be. What that did for me was that got me to slow down, because we assume sometimes what they're asking us and what we should answer. Whereas if you just dig a little bit deeper, they might reframe that question and you might get to the real answer that they're looking for. Now, one of the questions you always got to be asking is, once you uncover what the problem is, you're probably dealing with the person that it does impact the most, but it's worth asking the question, who does this impact the most within the organization? And find out who that person is and then go talk to them. You also need to understand who else obviously is involved in this, but you don't want to ask the dumb question like, what's your decision-making process? You want to ask more like, how have decisions like this been made in the past and who else should be involved so that we can make sure that you have all the information you need to make the right type of decision here. Don't ask the obvious sales-oriented question. Reframe them to put it in the client's best interest of why you're asking that question and why these people need to be involved or what the real impact of those problems is. I'm going to give you 3 questions that can help you uncover urgency, avoid no decision, and avoid indecision. The first one is, when do you want to go live with this solution? Not what's your decision timeline. Most reps ask for the decision timeline. I don't necessarily care what the decision timeline is. I care when they want to go live with this solution. Because if there isn't a go live date, the likelihood is your deal's going to slip. And then we want to ask, what's the impact to the business if we don't go live by that date? That question is critical, because if there is no impact, if they don't go live by that date, you're either not talking to the right person or I would not forecast that opportunity. Now, the final one to avoid indecision is what happens if you make the wrong decision on this? What happens if you go with the wrong vendor? That one is uncovering risk. Because as soon as somebody makes the commitment that they know they have to go from current state to future state, now they're thinking of all the bad implementations, all the bad promises that other vendors have given them. And so we need to find out what that is and de-risk this solution for them, de-risk this decision for them. So ask those 3 questions. When do you want to go live with this? What's the impact of the business if we don't go live with this? And what happens if you make the wrong decision on this? That will avoid no decision, indecision, and help you uncover urgency. You know, one of my favorite ways to go over somebody's head without pissing them off is ask them questions that they don't know the answers to. And I don't mean this to insult them. I mean for real reasons. Because look, if you want to uncover urgency, if you want to sell bigger deals, you have to align with the executive priorities here. So when I'm below the power line, I ask questions to align with that. Sounds something like this. Hey, when your CEO stood up at the beginning of the year, what were the 3 things that they said that you needed to do to be successful this year? And how, based on what you and I are talking about, does this initiative align with those? And what are some of the metrics that you're going to use to measure the impact? Usually I'll say something like, look, it's okay if you don't know those or don't know the details, but the reason I need to know that information is because if we can't align this solution, you and I could come up with something that we are violently in agreement that has a huge impact of what we're talking about here. But if we cannot align with the executive priorities as we move upstream to get budget for this, they're not going to be interested in making this investment. So you and I are going to waste a lot of time together here if we can't answer those questions. So if you can't introduce me to the person that can give me those answers, could I potentially write a list of them for you and will you go get them for me? That's how you know who a champion is, by the way. It's not about whether they tell you they're a champion or not. It's what they do. So if you ask somebody those questions, they don't have the answers, that's okay. But if they go get them for you, you should feel like you're in a pretty good position. When it comes to closing, you typically have to ask close-ended questions because you're looking for commitments, next steps, confirmations. Understanding different closing techniques helps you understand where, when, and how to close more appropriately, because different people like to be closed in different ways, and different scenarios require different closes, which is why you got to practice. For instance, you can use the upfront contract, which is a trial close. All it is, hey, if we got all this stuff done today, would you feel comfortable taking the next step? You're not saying, are you going to take the next step, which would be a hard close. You're doing a trial close, which is, if we did all this stuff, would you do this? You get a yes. And then at the end, when you did all that, now you can hard close. Now you can be very assumptive with your close. Okay, when do you want to schedule that next call? Closing is a skill, and asking the right questions at the right time matters. So these are just some of the tips that I give to some of the fastest growing companies in the world, along with my step-by-step training process. Companies like Salesforce, LinkedIn, Box, Dropbox. I've trained every single one of those reps. And the free content here is fantastic. But if you really want to level up and be one of the elite members of sales and excel and stay relevant in today's world, you got to join the membership, because this is where I give away all that training that companies spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for $420 a year. If you're willing to invest in yourself, I'm willing to invest in you. Let's make it happen.